speaking of the last election, Peter Dutton said this is a sliding doors moment for our nation. And maybe he was right, but in ways he didn't quite intend. So writes my guest today, pollster and head of the Australian Institute for Progress think tank, Graham Young. Graham, welcome. Sliding doors refers to the 1998 British film of the same name. The premise is that a seemingly minor event or decision can drastically affect what happens in the course of a person's life.
You catch this train, you catch your husband in bed, you catch the next train, you miss catching your husband in bed, but your marriage falls to pieces either way.
Yeah, okay. That might be the analogy that Peter Dutton's looking for.
It wasn't an ideal. It was not an ideal image.
This election has been analysed to death, and I'm sick of it, as I'm sure most people watching are. But you actually do proper research, and I thought it might be good to get you on to see some of the things that you've noticed and some of the trends that you've noticed in the research that you've done. So your polling showed that it appears that Peter Dutton lost the election more than Anthony Albanese won it. Isn't that always the case with elections?
So we should explain what you mean by proper research. Most of the pollsters do what's called quantitative polling. They can tell you, generally with a high degree of accuracy, although this election they were actually out by more than the sample error, so they all failed, what's going to happen on a particular day. They can't really tell you why.
You were on this show, actually, when they were all saying that it looked like Dutton was going to win. You were actually very cautious, I remember, in the interview that we did before the election.
I was. Yeah, I said that minority government was the most likely at that stage. I was wrong.
And, well, it was
very generous of you to have me back.
Well, it was a couple of weeks before the election, and things turned even worse. And at that point, it probably would have been minority government. It just got worse for Peter Dutton after that.
It did, yeah. It was only in the last week that I picked up, because I can only tell what's likely to happen in terms of the bulk numbers by reading what the other pollsters say. My polling gives me some insights into why that's happening, but it doesn't give me a sufficient baseline to say, yep, this is what's going to happen based on this research. But I can't. There are things that I can look at, and one of them is the approval ratings of the various leaders, whether people think the government's done enough to get elected or the opposition deserves to be elected, those sorts of things. And what the polling showed on that was that Peter Dutton's approval rating went like this, just fell off a cliff. So they both, on my figures, started off in January at about -20. So that's when you take the approvals and you take the disapprovals away from them.
Yep.
You got more people. You get a negative figure in that case.
The net approval rating.
Yeah.
So he was on -19.
Something like that.
And then it went to -42%.
That's right, over the course of the election. So he and Anthony Albanese were basically level pegging in January.
Albanese was -20 when Dutton was -19, and he went to -6. So he went up.
He went up a bit,
but
Dutton just fell off the cliff.
That is extraordinary, isn't it? -19 to -42. That's -23
and it was
percentage points.
Basically disappointment. So I think, and I've been doing more thinking of this since you saw that analysis that I did, and there was a positive expectation in January fed by all the pollsters, including the Liberal Party's pollster, who, for whatever reason, was writing articles and doing polling for the Financial Review as well as doing stuff for the Liberal Party. So you could kind of read in the Financial Review the headline figures that the Liberal Party was being fed. He was saying they're going to win in January. So there was this buzz of excitement amongst people on the centre-right. We're going to get rid of this bad government after just 3 years. Fantastic. Then I think there was a sense of betrayal during the course of the campaign. So words like strong were used about Peter Dutton in January. Words like strong were still used about Peter Dutton April, just before we went into the campaign proper.
That's good.
At the end of the campaign, so at the beginning they're saying he's strong, he's strong enough. At the end they're saying he wasn't strong enough, we were disappointed, I thought he'd be stronger.
Oh, so the word strong was coming up. It
came in a negative context.
That means
at the
people
end.
Value strengths, something they care about and they talk about.
No,
they've got to see him as strong.
It was, so, you've been in public relations. People come with characteristics and you can't change them radically. People will sniff out the phonyism. Remember when Julia Gillard said, I'm going to show you the real Julia Gillard. We all thought, well, who's that Julia that's been running the country for...
Yeah, exactly. Oh, you've been lying to us for 20 years.
The BS detectors were on. So
Yeah.
you can't fiddle with that sort of stuff. And one of the things that Dutton brought as part of his political persona was that he was strong. And that was because he'd been in portfolios where he'd had to secure the borders, for example, and where he'd been tough. So that was one of the characteristics that people saw in Peter.
That was
so if
positive.
you're going to vote for him, you're looking at those characteristics and you're saying, what does the country need? Yeah, they need a strong man. He's strong. During the course of the campaign, he flip-flopped on a couple of issues, which, like work from home, which put people off.
He flip-flopped badly. He didn't flip it. He needed probably to flip that. That was bad policy to start with. Then he should have framed it better when he presented it, the change, and not allow people to say, "Oh, you've done a backflip," like our moronic journalists always do. They always say, "Oh, when a politician changes their mind, it's a backflip." Like, can we grow up? Can we stop using that terminology? It's moronic, and we've got to start saying, "Look, a politician changed their mind. Was it right or wrong that they changed their mind? What was the policy? Why did they change it?" You know, you can change your mind and still look like a strong leader. You can change it. Trump does it all the time. You know, he'll put a crazy idea out there, then shift and then change his mind. But he does it in a way that doesn't lose the credibility. It still shows him to be a strong leader. He's a decision maker, and he says, "Well, I've taken on new information, and I'm making a decision." You know, that's good leadership.
Yeah, I think Trump's a special case. I wouldn't advise any politician other than Trump
that.
follow him.
No, only Trump can do
You've got to
Trump.
be an extraordinary person to get away with what he does. But the other thing with Peter was, I think they were scared about him being strong, his own campaign, and they were trying to soften his edges. And that didn't work either. So instead of taking Anthony Albanese on and saying, look, you know, you lied to us. You said our electricity prices were going to go down by $275. In fact, they've gone up by $1,000. That's a $1,275 credibility gap. How can anyone treat anything that you say seriously? You say this is going to happen in the future. Look at your past performance. Past performance dictates a likelihood of future performance. You're a liar. People shouldn't believe you. This stuff you're saying about nuclear, if you can't get this right, you're a liar. People shouldn't believe you. Now,
I've always said you should be the federal opposition leader, Graham Young.
Maybe you don't use the word liar, or maybe you do.
Yeah.
Trump would.
Yeah.
Trump would.
No, yeah, well, that's
and
right.
Despite me saying you shouldn't be like Trump, I think you could probably get away with that because going into the election, Albanese was regarded as weak. People were looking at him and saying, look, out of the two of these, I'd rather have this Dutton guy dealing with this fellow Trump than Albanese. But in the course of the campaign, that all sort of got lost, and Albanese ends up being the best person to deal with Trump.
Well, that's what happens when you don't stick to something, when you have a brand and an image positioning and you don't stick to it and stand by your product, and you say, oh, look, you know, we might win some of these inner city seats if you soften it down a bit, Pete. You know, we're worried about those inner city seats. And so he tries to be all things to all people, and you wind up with that Frankenstein result we've been talking about. I want to play this clip of Douglas Murray on Sky News Australia this week because I thought it was a really great little summary of things. Rita Panahi asked him what his advice would be to the Liberal Party of Australia to fix things, and I thought his answer was terrific. Have a listen to this.
Just like other centre-right parties around the world, they'll always get bad advice from people who wish them ill, and they'll take it. I'm afraid that's a routine
every time
with centre-right parties. Every time. There'll be people who would never vote for the Liberals who will say, I think what you need to do is to come further to the left and nearer to me and so on. No, I mean, for the party to be successful, like all centre-right parties, you have to show a set of things. You have to show a faith in the country, a love of the country, an understanding of people's need for belonging and aspiration, and much more. Particularly, by the way, that second one. I always say to politicians of the centre-right that, you know, the left always has this very, very powerful tool, which it uses, my goodness, how it uses it, which is the tool of resentment. You've got to resent the rich man. You've got to resent these people, the powerful, so on. But centre-right parties have a very, very useful thing, which they should be able to play back at it, which is aspiration. That is to show a means by which people who work hard in Australia follow the rules will actually be rewarded for it.
Yeah, I think we're missing that sort of vision, that positive vision message like Make America Great Again or something like that, that kind of people can rally around this positive message. It's just too negative, our discourse.
Well, the message was get Australia back on track. And we tested that with our focus group against the messages that the Labor Party and the Greens were running. And it actually tested better than those.
Okay.
But for that to work, you've
got to use it.
You've got to show, but you've also got to show people you're not on track.
Right. It's got a negative connotation.
You've got to say, we took a wrong turn.
And I want a cap.
We need to.
Where's my cap?
So there was no negative campaign against Labor.
Yeah.
And Labor got away with talking about the future. They also got a break because the Reserve Bank reduced interest rates. So that allowed them to say, oh, we're actually getting the economy back on track. What we're doing is succeeding.
Yeah. You said that the issue in your report that could have made a difference to either side if they'd leveraged it, so both of them didn't really leverage this enough, was housing.
Yeah, well, both of them tried to leverage it, but they had these nonsense policies that a federal government enacting them is not going to have a beneficial effect on the housing market. So both of them were trying to come up with policies that made it easier for you to buy a house. But if there's not enough houses to buy, what's the point?
If Dutton just said we're going to step bigger picture message, right? Less detail. We're going to just get out there and we're going to let people build and grow and do projects. We're going to get red tape. We're going to cut red tape. We're going to cut black tape. We're going to cut green tape. We're going to cut all the barriers, get rid of the regulation and really stimulate the housing market and just paint this picture. Well, you don't have to go into the micro detail of how you're going to do it and journalists bang on about we want policy, where's the policy? Then they never report a policy. It's a 9-second soundbite, right? And Trump knows this, and most other, Farage knows it, and all the other sort of great right-wing conservative and centre-right politicians that have broken through the thing have realised this.
So I'm old enough to remember when Bob Hawke beat Malcolm Fraser. And his tax policy was, we're going to get everyone together and we're going to have a conference. And I think that could have worked in terms of housing. If Peter Dutton had said, listen, they're trying to kid you that they can do something about housing, but the people who control housing are the states. And the problems there are there's not enough infrastructure, there's not enough approvals, there's too much red tape, there's councils getting in the way. What we're going to do after the election, if we win, is we're going to pull them all together. We've got a pot of money here to spend on infrastructure to make housing possible, and we're going to ask them to play ball, to put up their plans, and if they won't play ball and put up their plans, they don't get any of that money. It'll go to the states that do the work. And we'll put a bit of competition into the system.
Well,
if they'd taken that kind of approach, I think people would have said, yeah, we know this is BS, giving us, a 5% deposit, or you're going to co-invest as though you're our rich uncle.
Yeah. Oh, God.
Or you're going to let us tax deduct, our interest payments for the first 5 years. All that kind of stuff. People knew at the heart this is just
it's too much. It's too much detail. I mean, people don't. Yeah, it's just bits and pieces, and that's what the campaign descended to was this.
But the other issue there is immigration, which the federal government does have control over, and which is the other factor which is really impacting on housing. You can't import a Tasmania worth of people every year and they're not have an impact, not just on housing, but on services.
It's bleedingly obvious.
You've got to build schools, police stations, ambulance stations, hospitals.
We've got, as I said, we've got these under 40s. Okay, so what the left are obviously trying to do now is create an intergenerational war, right? They failed in dividing us on race. They failed in dividing us on gender. They failed in dividing us on sexuality. They've tried all the tricks. Now their latest division trick is going to be we're going to pit Gen Y and Z against Gen X and the boomers.
So why don't the Conservatives hit back and say, you kids in your 20s are being played for mugs by these guys.
Yes.
Because guess where the bill's going to land? Won't just be HECS debt. They're taking 20% off that now. But the bill, when you get to be our age, when you're looking for a comfortable retirement, that's when it's going to hit you.
So I'd just like to say to all the friendly Geordies and Punters Politics viewers, Boomer, my friend here, Gen X, will be dead. Okay, we won't be here anymore.
Well, speak for yourself. I've got no plans to die any time in the next century.
Okay, we'll get into that some other time. But we won't be paying the bill off, that's for sure. You guys are going to be paying the bill off. And what you've got to ask yourselves, when you're watching our friends on the left wing, in the left wing social media space, what is the why are they so resistant to these very simple realities of the fact that less government, less red tape, more investment, more positivity, more energy, more innovation, and less immigration actually are all going to help solve the housing problem. They seem to not want to talk about those things terribly much, except make them a tiny little 1/6 piece of pie in a Trivial Pursuit analogy.
I think that's because politicians aren't talking about them.
Yeah.
And if the leader of the opposition isn't talking about this sort of stuff, it just doesn't get on the agenda. Journalists don't talk about it. There's not op-eds in the paper talking about it and so on.
Okay, I want Jordan Shanks, I want Punters Politics, you and me, and maybe another public around this table, and we're going to have the conversation. I'm laying down the gauntlet there to you, Jordan Shanks. All right. I'm sorry. I'm just tired of listening to these guys and just they are having, because they're they are far more influential than we are. Far more influential.
They've got under your skin, Damien.
Well, they've got under my skin.
You can just turn them off.
Well, they've won the election because of this stuff, and we have to realise that on the right. People are not aware of the impact these guys have. They have a massive impact. The Liberal Party doesn't even know what social media is. They won't even come on this show, let alone those shows. That's how pathetic they are. I'm sorry.
I don't think it was social media, much as I'd like to think it, that won the last election. I think
it's not social media.
The Liberal Party.
Media. These guys are the media. He's got 1.7 million viewers, subscribers.
Yeah, but how many of them are in Australia?
Oh, but everybody in the Liberal Party thinks that the media is Channel 9. It's not, Graham. It's not. You're showing your boomerness. It's not. This is the media. You're on it right now. Okay, we've got more viewers than Sky News on this show right now. So, and I have got nothing compared to Friendly Geordies and Punters Politics. So, wake up, Liberal Party communications. It's a joke what they did.
But
sorry, that's my rant.
I think the reason they lost was they were in a winning position at the beginning of the year. They didn't have a clear brand proposition. So, get Australia back on track. It's kind of okay, but was never really defined properly. What does that mean? They didn't have an attack in terms of their campaigning, and they hadn't properly fleshed out the policies that they were running on. Plus, there were policies they could have run on, they didn't choose to run on, which might have made a huge difference.
And they don't know where young people are watching and getting their information from. So once you're right, they didn't have all those things on a strategic and messaging level in place right from the start. But they also didn't have the delivery, the channels. They weren't on this show. They weren't on Topher's show. They weren't on, RV Yemeni Rebel News got a massive following. They ran away from, oh no, that's the far right. I mean, give me a break. This show, far right?
Well, that's a good example of what Douglas Murray was talking about, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Since the election, I've heard all this advice being given about you've got to move to the centre, you've got to do this, that and the other thing. I don't even know what the centre is. The centre basically is a midpoint between two opposing points of view. It's defined by those two opposing points of view. And if you think you're going to win elections by allowing other people to define what it is you stand for, you're sadly mistaken.
In a world where you have a public opinion curve that looks like a bell shape, the centre, you just win the centre and you don't worry about the extremes. What they don't realise, they're still playing that strategy, which is 20th century strategy. The world shifted. We now have a public opinion curve that's a U shape. And if you don't look after your base, if you don't build a strong base, forget it. You're done.
Well,
and that's why they're bleeding out 11.7% to minor right-wing parties on the right side.
Yeah.
And they don't see it.
But the most successful parliamentary leaders we've had in terms of winning elections, Malcolm Fraser, 2 record landslides. John Howard, landslide. And Tony Abbott, landslide. Almost as big as Anthony Albanese's. Those 3 gentlemen all believed in differentiating your product from the other product.
That's right.
And it's not, you don't have to be ideological. You don't have to. There's a thing in sales, they talk about sell benefits. Benefits, not features.
Exactly.
Ideology is a feature. I'm going to get you into a house.
Is a benefit.
I'm going to get you a good income. I'm going to get you good education. They're all benefits. And you don't have to say, oh, I'm right wing, you should vote for me. It's, no, here's something I can do for you. And if you can't demonstrate that what I believe in is going to do something good for you, you're not going to win the election.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if all you do is promise goodies, which is what happened from both sides in the last election, it's just like an auction. And it is a sliding doors moment in the sense that Well, do I go with that pile of goodies or this pile of goodies? Well, it's no biggie. They're pretty similar. These guys are, they're pretty similar to each other and they both like each other, really. Look, I'll go with this one. End of story.
We've gone way over time. Way over time. Went in a direction I didn't expect to go, but it's always a pleasure talking to you, Graham. I love thrashing these things out. It's excellent. So thanks very, very much for joining us and putting up with my rants and being on the show once again. Graham Young from the Australian Institute for Progress.
Thanks, Dave.
Good to have you. I want to tell you about a fantastic initiative that's happening out of Canberra right now. It's called the Awards for Men in Leadership. The awards are given out on International Men's Day, which is November 19. They're designed to combat the increasing denigration of masculinity in our culture and the widespread discrimination against males inside and outside the workplace. The goal is to lift the well-being of boys and men and facilitate healthy collaboration between men and women. The awards for men in leadership are designed to inspire men to make a bigger contribution to family and community and to elevate positive male role models. There's a $10,000 scholarship for studies and professional development, public recognition for the winners, and a year of mentorship and executive coaching for each recipient. It's targeted at young men and middle-aged guys who fought their way up from some other kind of disadvantage. This is the third year of the awards and it'll be the biggest yet. To find out more, just search up the Awards for Men in Leadership on Facebook. That was a segment from a recent episode of our fortnightly news commentary show, The Other Side, with me, Damien Curry. If you liked it, support us. Subscribe to our channel on YouTube right now so you don't miss a thing. It's totally free. Just click that subscribe button and the little bell. And check out our Other Side Unplugged show too, and join our mission to actually do something and change Aussie media for the better at othersidetv.com.au. That's othersidetv.com.au. Check it out now.